So good morning. It is my delight to be your guest speaker today. And in honor of Cheryl, I did come up with a joke. And this is a groaner, and it is a joke within a joke. So stay tuned. So a Zen master visiting New York City goes to a hot dog vendor and says, "Make me one with everything." But that's not all. The hot dog vendor fixes the hot dog, hands it to the Zen master, and puts the money, the Zen master hands him the money, puts it in his box and closes the box. Zen master says, "Where's my change?" Hot dog vendor says, "Change must come from within." Yeah. Good one, huh? So I wanted to say that joke because today I'm going to be working with some ideas from this book. I've launched a book study. I'm convening a book study about this book, and it's about change. It's about the art of change. And so I thought that was a very appropriate way to start our time off together. So how many of you have made resolutions, ready to go, ready to do it, only to abandon your effort weeks or months later? Anybody have that experience? Yeah. I remember when I was younger, I stopped making resolutions because I just was like, I know I'm not going to do it. And so this book explains why it is hard to change and how we can begin to overcome those difficulties. He tackles them head on in the book. It's a wonderful read. I'm really enjoying it. So I'm going to start with a little exercise that the author takes us through. And I want you to consider, just for a sec, who's beating your heart? Who's regulating your body temperature? Who's processing my words right now? Who's metabolizing your breakfast? Are you doing that? In this book, we start with a primary assertion that there's an innate intelligence that enlivens our physical body. It beats our heart, it regulates our temperature, it carries on thousands of biochemical reactions every second. It gives us the power to heal. When you get a cut, what happens? Your body starts to heal right away. And so we can make use of this incredible, powerful, essential intelligence. We can tap into it and use it to thrive on every level of our being. We can tap into this and use it to thrive. This divine intelligence is our birthright. We were born with great potential. It is said we only use a small percentage of our brain power. I'm sure we've all heard that. And there's only but a small percentage of our genes that we actually express. This has become common knowledge now. And yet, from an early age, we're acculturated to be limited. We can be acculturated that you only get so far in life, that you can only do this, you can only do that. And that we are subject to the activities in our environment rather than the other way around. And that's what this book does, is it begins to turn the tables on that assumption that we can make a positive impact on our environment rather than our environment affecting us. And so we are here today, all of us are here today, because of a wonderful couple named Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And we're going to go to our little slide of them. There's a slide of Charles and Myrtle somewhere in our process. There they are, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. We are convened here today because of these people. And they were introduced to the teachings of something called Christian Science through a lecture by a man named E.B. Weeks. And Myrtle Fillmore, she was considered to be a sickly child. She was told that illness and weakness kind of ran in her family, and she was sort of destined to be sickly her whole life. At one point, as a young mother, she contracted tuberculosis. and was told that she only had about 6 months to live. And she's kind of, accepted that. But then she went to this lecture, this New Thought lecture, and the words that she heard are very famous. And what she heard was, "You are a child of God, and therefore you do not inherit sickness." And those words were the touchstone for her that set her on her healing journey, that set her on the path of really taking back her power as an infinite being, an infinite creative being. And so her 2-year healing journey began that night, and a 6-month death sentence became a life filled with love and prosperity, and she went on to live into her 80s. How did she do it? She recognized this innate intelligence in her body. She began to talk to her body and tell it what she wanted. She gave it a blueprint for wholeness. She spoke words of love and affirmation to every part of her body. Outside of her meditation time, she was careful to speak only words of kindness and affirmation. She monitored her thoughts and filtered out any worried or anxious thoughts. And she was vigilant in restoring balance in her body. So she really just stepped into somebody who could heal. She stepped into her power as someone who could heal herself. And there's a quote from this book. This is a wonderful book called How to Let God Help You. And Myrtle, in the early part of the book, she outlines how she healed herself. And then the rest of it is about her correspondences with people who would write her letters and ask her advice. And they've compiled a wonderful volume of her advice in this book. It's a great readable book, and I recommend it. So here's a quote from that book. She wrote, "I was thinking about life. Life is everywhere, in animals and in people. Then why doesn't the life in the animal make a body like a human's?" I asked. Then I thought, the animal has not as much sense as a human. Ah, intelligence as well as life is needed to make a body. Here is the key to my discovery. Life has to be guided by intelligence in making all forms. The same law works in my own body. Life is simply a form of energy and has to be guided and directed in a person's body by his or her intelligence. How do we communicate intelligence? By thinking and talking, of course. Then it flashed upon me that I might talk to the life in every part of my body and have it do just what I wanted. I began to teach my body and got wonderful results. There you have it. And so this brings me to the author of this book, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He, in his younger years, was in a triathlon. And as you know, it's swimming and biking and running. And during the biking portion, they had people lined up along the pathway for the bicyclers to go, and to make sure the traffic was okay. And one of the directors was not in the right place. And he was flagging people on. And eventually what happened was he flagged Joe into the path of traffic. Yeah. And so Joe was hit smack, directly by a car, was thrown in the air, and landed on his back. And his back was broken in 7 places. And he, being a chiropractor, knew what this meant. He knew what was going to happen, what they were going to recommend, what the course of treatment was going to be. And in the hospital, the 4 doctors recommended the same surgery. And this was surgery that was really going to leave him in constant pain and disabled for the rest of his life. But he was told that that was his only option. Otherwise, you're just going to be paralyzed for the rest of your life, is what they said. And he began to ponder this. And he decided no. He decided he wasn't going to do that. He had a knowing. He had that same knowing that Myrtle had. He had this knowing that this intelligence in his body could heal his body. And here's a quote from him. "I decided against the medical model and the expert recommendations. I believe that there is an intelligence and an invisible consciousness within each of us. That's the giver of life. It keeps our hearts beating more than 100,000 times a day, creates almost 100 trillion specialized cells, starting with only 2, and organizes hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions in a single second. I recognized that if this intelligence was real, and if it willfully, mindfully, and lovingly demonstrated such amazing abilities, maybe I could take my attention off my external world and begin to go within and connect with it and develop a relationship with it." So he opted out of the surgery, had to sign all the forms, opting out of, against medical advice, and was taken by ambulance to a friend's house. He has very nice friends who allowed him to heal. And it took him 10 weeks. Took him 10 weeks. He spent hours a day mentally rebuilding his spine, literally, vertebra by vertebra by vertebra. He would go in and rebuild his spine in his mind. He would direct his body. He would remember how it felt to be whole, and he would continually call up that feeling. He would visualize how, because he knew anatomy, so he knew how his vertebrae were supposed to look, and he began to create a blueprint in his mind of a healthy spine. It took him 10 weeks, and then he dedicated his life to learning more about this process. He spent lots of years researching neuroanatomy, the anatomy of the brain, epigenetics, biochemistry, and even quantum physics. He talks a little bit about in the books. And he began to collect data, lots of data. He would comb the literature and collect research that proved this idea of mind over matter. And here in the 21st century, we are really at an advantage because there is now a lot of research that backs up, that has hard data of mind over matter. And I have as I was reading this and I was remembering about Myrtle, I had a little joke within myself that Myrtle was up there and she's looking down at us going, "They're just not getting it. They're just not getting it. What am I going to do? I know, I'm going to reincarnate as an Italian chiropractor in California." Yep, he's going to have a really bad accident and rebuild his spine. Then they'll get it. That's dramatic enough that they'll get that. Because when I read this, I see many, many previews of this. In other words, a lot of the things that she talks about in this book, in her 18th century language, is now updated in our 21st century language. It's really a lot of fun to see those parallels. So this book is the research in the science of self-transformation. He's outlined, again, how Myrtle healed herself biologically, neurologically, biochemically. And he calls his teaching style information to transformation. And what that means is he's going to give you the information that you need to begin to make those transformations in your body. If you know why you're doing what you're doing, it's going to be easier on the how. Okay, and an example he gives is there was a study done several years ago with a group of housekeepers in a hotel. And they were all overweight and out of shape. And yet, the researchers noticed that they worked very hard in their job. They did a lot of hard physical labor. They're vacuuming, they're flipping mattresses, they're mopping, they're scrubbing. And what they noticed is what they were actually exceeding the recommended amount of exercise in their day. And yet, they were still out of shape. And so they designed a study. And what they did was they took all of the housekeepers and they said, here's some information. Do you know that regular exercise is really good for your health? You'll lose weight, you'll get in shape, your cholesterol will come down, things like that. And then they measured them, they weighed them, they measured them, they took their blood and such. And then they divided them into two groups. And one group was the control group, and all they had was the information that exercise was important. The other group, they said, look, throughout your day, in all the work that you do, you are exceeding the amount of exercise that a person needs to be healthy. And so they followed them for about a month. The study lasted about a month. And after a month, the control group hadn't lost very much weight at all. The group who they told they were exercising while they were working lost a lot of weight and began to get back into shape. They had the information. They weren't doing anything different in their lives. They were doing the same work, the same job, but they began to lose weight because they now were informed. The information that the study gave them helped them to transform their bodies. Again, mind over matter. So this is one example of what he's talking about when he talks about mind over matter, mind controlling matter. Okay, so the book, again, gives the biochemical and neurological ideas about how we can change, how we can transform. I think all of us instinctively know that there's more to us than meets the eye, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that we step onto that spiritual path, because we know that there's more. We know that. We just instinctively know that. And we know that there's more than what we're told in our media. We know that we are more than what people have brainwashed to be. And we get on that spiritual path and we begin to do our inner work. And we begin to open ourselves up to what I call transformational technologies, which is what we have now. There's a lot of really good information out there now, a lot of really good teachers, as you know. And so he is just one of them. So what if we could create a new normal? That's the premise of this talk. I work with a spiritual teacher on a regular basis. And she has enlivened for us students this idea of a new normal. What if radiant health was your new normal? What if unlimited abundance was your new normal? What if unmitigated joy was your new normal? What if infinite creativity and infinite intelligence was your new normal? What do you think about that? Your new normal. Well, that's what we're here to create in this book. We're here to begin to consider creating a new normal for ourselves, raising the bar for ourselves, spiritually, physically, socially, financially. We're going to raise the bar. And one of the most powerful tools that the book gives us is to ask a question such as, what if? What if? What would it feel like to? What would it feel like to be healthy? What would it feel like to be abundant? How would I have to think to be more abundant? How would I have to think as a wealthy person, for example? And a great example that he gives in the book is the story of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, as you know, was imprisoned in South Africa for many years. And there was little hope of his release. And then one day, in his prayer time, the question occurred to him, what if? What if I could get out of prison? What if I could be free? And as he began to ask that question, the thought occurred to him that he should write to the United States. And so he began to write letters to the United States. And after several months, one of his letters finally reached someone who could make a difference, who could open the doors. And as you know, soon after that, he was released. And so there's an example of just asking that simple question, what if? And the one I also like is, who says? Who says it has to be this way? Who made up that rule? What if we could make up our own rules about how we want to be in the world? So think about that. Who says? And think about Gandhi. And he taught us to be the change we want to see. Be that change. Step into your power as a creator. Step into your power as a peaceful being. Step into your power as someone who is infinitely loving and compassionate, wise, powerful. Just step into it. Be that change. And there's a nice quote that I like that was in the newsletter a few months ago. Let's go to that quote. Yeah. There's a quote, look, the quote slide, this one. You'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routine. So if we keep doing the same thing, it's the same thing, the same thing, the same thing, how can we expect different things to show up in our lives? So we have to begin to think differently and act differently to begin to instigate the changes in our lives. We have to become astute observers of our internal state. So during the day, begin to notice how you think about yourself, how you feel about yourself. How much time do you spend obsessing about the past? Oh, darn, I should have said that. I should have done that. Or zoom into the future and worrying about what might be. Think about that. If we're really honest with ourselves, we'll realize that our thoughts and our feelings a lot of times are not in alignment with where we want to be, that there's a gap between here, this is where I am, and this is where I want to be. And there's a gap because of our conditioning. We're conditioned to think and feel in a certain way. And Einstein said that the problems that we are having right now cannot be solved at the level in which they're created, right? We all know that. And so if we have challenges in our lives, if we want to be in a different place in our lives, we have to begin to think and act greater than those challenges, okay? So I'm going to take you into a little exercise to finish this up. And here's a question to ponder. What is the greatest expression of yourself that you could possibly imagine? How could you begin to allow more of this divine intelligence to express in your life? And I have another slide, a little illustration to show you. Can we turn these off? Maybe turn these down a little. Okay, can you see that? We're like fingers on a hand, okay? That we are all have at our core this divine intelligence. We all have equal access to this divine intelligence. And this divine intelligence, it comes and it manifests as our individual humans. But the flow is always there. Think of that. The flow is always, there's a constant flow of divine intelligence. And so it's just a matter of remembering that we're connected, remembering that we have that capacity. So I want you to get settled in, and you have in your bulletin a little paper for notes, okay? And you may want to jot down just some quick notes as I take you through this exercise. Okay, so just think about, in what areas of your life would you like to create a new normal? And what might that look like? What would you have to do differently to bring this change about? How would you have to think differently to begin this change? And start to ask yourself the what-if questions. And as you're doing this, I'm going to play a little inspirational music. It's become my new theme song, and it's called We Shine Like Stars. And so I just want you to allow this music to kind of get you pumped up as you think about creating your new normal, creating the greatest expression of yourself that you can possibly be.
This is the life I make. I don't need a holiday to make me feel this way. Listen up. Take a chance, you can sing, you can dance, you can live like there's no tomorrow. Give it time and you'll find there's a groove, there's a rhyme, move along and the rest will follow. I want you to know, oh yeah, we shine like stars. Oh yeah, we shine like stars, like stars, like what are we waiting for? It seems we still want more. No one can take away the dreams we have today. Yeah, you can go with the flow, don't you see, don't you know there's a life that burns inside you. You can shout, let it out, not a care, not a doubt, this is it, let the moment guide you. I want you to know, oh yeah, we shine like stars. Oh yeah, we shine like stars, like
You shine like stars. You shine like stars. How are you going to shine in your life? How are you going to create a new normal? How are you going to raise the bar? So consider something you might do differently this week. Allow these notes to inspire you. Consider, how do you allow universal consciousness to flow through you? Speak words of kindness to yourself. Uplift yourself. When you look in the mirror, love yourself. See the wise, intelligent, creative being looking back at you. And we'll work in this book study, we'll work with the concepts in this book to inspire ourselves, to express ourselves more fully in the world. And in closing, I want to share something that came to me in my meditation. And in my meditation, I was in a box, a very tall box, like a refrigerator box. And to see over the top of the box, I had to jump like this. I had to kind of, and I would get a glimpse of my infinity but then I would fall back down. And then as I grew, I would grow taller in this vision. And eventually I was able to see over the top of the box because I was growing and I could see my possibilities. But it was still a stretch. I still had to really stretch. And then I grew some more and I could see over the top of the box and I could see everywhere around and I could begin to really take in my infinite possibilities. And I grew taller and taller and eventually all I had to do was step outside of the box. And I knew that I was free. So I invite you to work with that in your prayer time. And I'm going to close with a quote from Myrtle. I want everyone to know about this beautiful true law and to use it. It's not a new discovery, but when you have it and you use it and you get the fruits of health and harmony, it will seem new to you and you will feel that in it is your own discovery. Consider that this week. And so we're going to affirm together, I allow myself to imagine a new normal filled with infinite possibilities and endless joy. Can you catch the vision? Excellent.